They say marriage is compromise. I just didn't know mine would involve so many receipts for scented candles and so few for actual affection. My name is Marlow Trasker, and at 41, I've become a ghost in my own house, the kind of invisible that makes waiters forget your order and wives forget your birthday. I work in IT consulting, which means I fix other people's problems while mine pile up like unread emails. The irony isn't lost on me. I can debug a network crash in minutes, but I can't figure out when my marriage started running on empty. Vanna, my wife of 12 years, used to laugh at my jokes. Now she barely looks up from her phone when I talk. She's 38, works in marketing for some trendy agency downtown, and always seems to be rushing somewhere important. Somewhere that isn't here. Working late again tonight, she announced this morning, not asking, just informing. Her coffee mug clinked against the granite countertop, the expensive one she insisted we needed to elevate our space. I wanted to elevate my response, but settled for nodding like the well-trained husband I'd apparently become. The rain hammered our Portland windows, creating that moody backdrop this city's famous for. I watched Vanna grab her designer purse, another investment in our image, and disappear into her BMW. The garage door rumbled shut, and silence settled over our mid-tier suburban paradise like a wet blanket. My office buddy Gabe called around noon. "Marlow, my man, you sound like someone stole your last slice of pizza. What's eating you?" "Just marriage stuff," I said, staring at my computer screen where lines of code blurred together. Vanna's been distant lately, more than usual. "Distance in marriage is like a computer virus," Gabe said with his usual offbeat wisdom. "Ignore it long enough, and it corrupts everything." He wasn't wrong. The signs had been accumulating like spam in an unfiltered inbox. Late nights that stretched later, phone calls she took in other rooms, the way she'd angle her screen away when texting, classic behavioral patterns that any IT guy would recognize as suspicious activity. That evening, I tried cooking dinner, her favorite pasta with the expensive sauce she likes. The kitchen filled with garlic and herbs, creating the kind of domestic atmosphere that used to make her smile. But 7 o'clock came and went, then 8, then 9. At 9:47, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanna. Emergency client meeting. Don't wait up." I stared at the message, then at the untouched dinner cooling on the stove. Emergency client meetings don't usually happen at nearly 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. In my line of work, I've learned that when something doesn't make sense, it's usually because someone's hiding the real data. The next morning, I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Not in a creepy stalker way, just using the observational skills that make me good at my job. Details matter in IT. A misplaced semicolon can crash an entire system. A wife who suddenly starts wearing new perfume might be signaling a different kind of system failure. Kalia called that afternoon. She's Vanna's best friend, 39, outgoing in all the ways Vanna used to be. More importantly, Kalia's always been straight with me. When Vanna was being unreasonable, Kalia would roll her eyes and mouth "sorry" behind her back. When I made terrible jokes at parties, Kalia would laugh anyway. "Hey, Marlow," she said, her voice carrying that careful tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news. "How are you doing?" "Depends on what you know that I don't," I replied, settling into my home office chair. Through the window, Portland's perpetual drizzle created abstract patterns on the glass. I worry about you sometimes. You seem stressed lately." Kalia knew something. I could hear it in the pauses between her words, the way she emphasized "you" instead of asking about both of us. In my business, we call this a tell, an unintentional signal that reveals the real story. "Vanna's been working a lot," I said, testing the waters. "Yeah, she mentioned that." Another pause. "Marlow, you know you can talk to me, right? If you ever need to." After we hung up, I sat in my office listening to the rain and thinking about patterns. In network security, we look for anomalies, things that don't fit the established baseline. My marriage had developed several anomalies lately. That weekend, Vanna went out with her squad, Rena and Tessa, two women who gossip like it's an Olympic sport. They see everything and miss nothing, which usually annoyed me. But now I was curious about what they might have seen. I was organizing receipts for our taxes when I found it. Tucked between a gas station charge and a grocery run was a receipt from Silk and Satin, some upscale lingerie boutique at Rainier Galleria. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday, a day Vanna claimed to be stuck in back-to-back meetings. But that wasn't the part that made my stomach drop. At the bottom of the receipt, in the customer information section, someone had written E. Rowe in neat handwriting. Ethan Rowe, Vanna's ex-boyfriend from college. The guy who always seemed to pop up at the most convenient times, offering to help with this or advice about that. Smug, successful in real estate, with the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. I stared at that receipt for a long time, rain pattering against the windows like Morse code. The numbers didn't lie. $247.83 for items I'd never seen, purchased on a day my wife was supposedly too busy for lunch, with her ex-boyfriend's name on the paperwork. In IT, when you find evidence of a security breach, you don't panic. You gather more data, you build a complete picture before you act. But sitting there in my home office, surrounded by the life Vanna and I had built together, I felt something shift inside me. If my marriage was a stock, I'd sell. If only I could short it. The rain kept falling, and I kept staring at that receipt. Somewhere in the city, my wife was probably telling Ethan about her boring husband who spent too much time with computers and not enough time understanding women. They had no idea what this boring husband was about to understand. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The next afternoon, I did something I'd never done in 12 years of marriage. I tracked Vanna's phone, not through some spy app or illegal method, just the family location sharing we'd set up years ago for safety. The little blue dot showed her at Rainier Galleria, not at her downtown office where she claimed to be handling a crisis presentation. I grabbed my keys and drove through Portland's maze of one-way streets, windshield wipers fighting the persistent drizzle. The mall parking lot was half empty, the kind of Tuesday afternoon scene where every footstep echoes and every conversation carries. From the second-floor balcony near the food court, I had a perfect view of the main shopping corridor. The glass ceiling let in gray light that matched my mood, and I felt like some discount private investigator in a Raymond Chandler novel. All I needed was a cigarette and a fedora. Then I saw them. Vanna and Ethan walked out of a jewelry store, her hand touching his arm in that casual way that means everything. He carried 2 shopping bags, one from silk and satin, another from some boutique I didn't recognize. She was laughing at something he said, the kind of genuine laugh I hadn't heard in months. I watched them for 10 minutes, documenting their body language like I was analyzing network traffic patterns. The way she leaned into him when they stopped to look at store windows, how he guided her with a hand on her lower back, the comfortable rhythm of 2 people who'd done this before. Instead of charging down there and making a scene, I called Kalia. Vanna took her ex-boyfriend lingerie shopping, I said without preamble. I need backup. Where are you? Kalia's voice sharpened with interest. Rainier Galleria, 2nd floor, watching my marriage dissolve in real time. Give me 10 minutes. And Marlow, I'm not wearing beige today. Kalia arrived in 8 minutes, wearing a red dress that turned heads and an expression that could cut glass. She found me still watching from the balcony, though Vanna and Ethan had moved to a coffee shop where they sat across from each other like teenagers on a first date. Okay, Kalia said, following my gaze. That's not good. Define not good. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife is having a lovely afternoon with her ex while I'm at home wondering why she doesn't laugh at my jokes anymore. Kalia studied the scene below, then turned to me with a smile that would have made a shark nervous. How do you feel about fighting fire with fire? Depends on who gets burned. Oh, honey, she said, linking her arm through mine. We're about to find out. Kalia dragged me to Silk and Satin, the same boutique from the receipt. The store was all soft lighting and expensive fabrics, the kind of place where everything costs more than my monthly car payment. A young saleswoman named Amber greeted us with the enthusiasm of someone working on commission. We need something dramatic, Kalia announced, browsing through racks of silk and lace. Something that makes a statement. What kind of statement? Amber asked, clearly intrigued by the potential sale. The kind that says, your husband is an idiot if he doesn't appreciate this, Kalia replied, holding up a black negligee that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold. This morning I'd been debugging a client's email server. Now I was standing in a lingerie store while my wife's best friend selected ammunition for some kind of marital warfare I didn't fully understand yet. Kalia chose 3 sets. The black negligee, a red silk ensemble that looked like it belonged in a movie, and something in midnight blue that made Amber nod approvingly. Then she grabbed my hand and headed for the fitting rooms. What exactly are we doing? I asked as she pushed me toward a chair outside the changing area. We're collecting evidence, she said, disappearing behind a curtain, and we're making sure Vanna knows that 2 can play this game. The next few minutes redefined my understanding of the phrase uncomfortable situation. Kalia emerged from the fitting room in the black ensemble, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. She handed me her phone and positioned herself in front of the 3-way mirror. Take pictures, she said. Make sure the store tags are visible. And Marlow, try to look like you're enjoying yourself. I took the photos, feeling surreal and slightly guilty, but as I watched Kalia pose and smile, I remembered the image of Vanna laughing with Ethan downstairs, the way she had touched his arm, the receipt with his name on it. Perfect, Kalia said, reviewing the images. Now post this to your Instagram story. Make sure it's visible to Vanna and her friends. Are you sure about this? I asked, though I was already opening the app. Marlow, your wife is downstairs buying lingerie with her ex-boyfriend using your joint account. I'm pretty sure the time for subtlety has passed. I posted the photo, Kalia in the mirror, my reflection visible behind her, both of us looking like we were having the time of our lives. I tagged the location and added a caption. Afternoon shopping with someone who appreciates good taste. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing. Likes, comments, direct messages. But the notification I was waiting for came 10 minutes later, a text from Vanna. What the hell is this? Followed immediately by a photo of Ethan holding her shopping bags with the caption, He knows my style. I showed the message to Kalia, who was back in her red dress and looking pleased with herself. She's rattled, Kalia observed. Good. Rattled people make mistakes. We left Silk and Satin with our purchases. Kalia insisted I buy the black set for evidence, and walked through the mall like we owned the place. I felt different somehow, like I'd been playing defense for years and finally decided to try offense. My phone kept buzzing. Social media notifications, text messages, missed calls. The photo was spreading through our social circle like a computer virus, and I was the one who'd written the code. You know she's going to confront you about this, Kalia said as we reached the parking garage. I'm counting on it, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. And Ethan? I thought about that for a moment, watching rain streak down the concrete walls. Ethan's about to learn that IT guys are very good at problem solving, and right now, he's definitely a problem that needs solving. Kalia laughed, the same genuine sound I remembered from better times with Vanna. I always liked you, Marlow, but I think I'm about to like you even more. As I drove home through Portland's wet streets, I checked my rearview mirror and saw my reflection. For the first time in months, I looked like someone who had a plan. The rain kept falling, but somehow it didn't feel quite so gray anymore. I didn't have to wait long. The next afternoon, while I was working from home and pretending to focus on a client's database migration, I got a text from Kalia. Incoming. Vanna and Ethan just parked outside Silk and Satin. She looks furious. I was there in 15 minutes, taking the stairs to the second floor 2 at a time. Through the mall's glass railings, I could see them in the boutique, Vanna gesturing angrily at her phone while Ethan stood nearby looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Kalia met me by the fountain, wearing jeans and a casual sweater that somehow made her look more dangerous than yesterday's red dress. She's been showing everyone your photo, Kalia said, trying to spin it like you're the one having an affair. Projection, I said. Classic deflection technique. When your system's compromised, blame the antivirus software. Well, this antivirus software is about to get an upgrade. We walked into Silk and Satin like we owned the place. Amber, the saleswoman from yesterday, looked up with recognition and barely concealed excitement. Vanna and Ethan stood near the back of the store, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees when Vanna saw us. Well, I said, loud enough for the other customers to hear. Fancy meeting you here, honey. Vanna's face went pale, then flushed red. What are you doing here, Marlow? Shopping, I replied, putting my arm around Kalia's waist. Same as you, apparently. Though I notice you're not alone, either. Ethan stepped forward, puffing up like a rooster. Look, man, this isn't what you think. Really? I pulled out my phone and showed him the receipt I'd photographed. Because I think my wife used our joint account to buy lingerie while you were with her. Your name's on the paperwork, Ethan. Want to explain that? The store went quiet. Even the soft jazz music seemed to pause. Amber pretended to organize inventory while clearly listening to every word. It's not like that, Vanna said, but her voice lacked conviction. Ethan was just helping me pick out something nice. For you. It was supposed to be a surprise. Kalia laughed, a sharp sound that cut through Vanna's explanation like a blade. A surprise? Is that what we're calling it now? Stay out of this, Kalia, Vanna snapped. This is between me and my husband. Your husband who you've been lying to about working late. Kalia pulled out her own phone. Because I have screenshots of your location history, sweetie. You've been here 4 times in the past 2 weeks. I stared at Kalia, impressed despite everything. You tracked her phone too? Family plan, Kalia said with a shrug. She added me years ago and never removed access. Ethan was looking increasingly uncomfortable, probably realizing he'd walked into something more complicated than he'd bargained for. Maybe we should take this somewhere private. Private? I said. Like the private shopping trips, the private coffee dates, the private whatever this is that my wife forgot to mention? You're being ridiculous, Vanna said, but she was backing toward the exit. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene? I laughed, and it felt good. Vanna, you've been making a scene for weeks. I'm just finally showing up to watch. That's when I played my ace. I pulled out a printed bank statement, every purchase from Silk and Satin, every coffee shop charge, every suspicious transaction from the past month. All highlighted in yellow, all time-stamped, all damning. Here's the thing about joint accounts, I said, loud enough for everyone in the store to hear. Both parties can freeze them. Vanna's eyes widened. You didn't. I did, this morning. So if you want to keep shopping with Ethan, he's going to have to pay for it himself. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Vanna grabbed a silk robe from the nearest rack and marched to the counter. I'll take this, she told Amber. Amber looked between us nervously, then processed the card. I'm sorry, ma'am, but this card was declined. Try it again, Vanna said through gritted teeth. Still declined? Ethan stepped forward and handed over his credit card with the confident gesture of a man used to solving problems with money. We all watched as Amber swiped it, waited, then shook her head apologetically. Also declined, sir. The look on Ethan's face was worth every uncomfortable moment of this entire mess. He tried another card, then another. All declined. I made a mental note to thank Gabe for that tip about credit monitoring services. Apparently they're very sensitive to unusual spending patterns. This is ridiculous, Ethan said, his voice rising. There's obviously some mistake. The mistake, I said calmly, was thinking I wouldn't notice. That's when Ethan made his biggest error. He stepped toward me, chest puffed out, hands clenched. You think you're so smart, don't you? Hiding behind your computers and your bank accounts? He never got to finish the sentence. Not because I hit him, though the thought crossed my mind, but because he knocked over a display of expensive perfumes while gesturing dramatically. Glass bottles crashed to the floor, filling the store with a mixture of scents that smelled like a flower shop explosion. Security, Amber called, apparently deciding she'd had enough drama for one day. Tommy, the mall security guard I'd noticed yesterday, appeared with the supernatural timing that all security personnel seem to possess. He was in his 50s, built like a former cop, with the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested he'd seen everything twice. What's the problem here? Tommy asked, surveying the perfume carnage. This man knocked over our display, Amber said, pointing at Ethan. It was an accident, Ethan protested, but his voice cracked slightly. Expensive accident, Tommy observed, pulling out his radio. Folks, I'm going to need everyone to step outside while we sort this out. As Tommy escorted Ethan toward the exit, I heard him explaining mall policy about property damage and liability. Vanna followed them, leaving behind the silk robe and what remained of her dignity. Kalia and I watched them go, then turned to Amber, who was staring at the perfume mess with the expression of someone calculating her commission loss. We'll take these, Kalia said, placing the 3 lingerie sets we'd tried on yesterday on the counter, and bill them to this account. She handed over a credit card that worked perfectly. As we left the store, I saw Rena, one of Vanna's squad, standing by the jewelry store with her phone out. She'd obviously been recording the whole thing, and her fingers were already flying across the screen, probably updating everyone she knew about the drama she'd just witnessed. Well, Kalia said as we walked toward the parking garage, that went better than expected. Did it? I asked, though I was smiling. Marlow, honey, your wife just got humiliated in front of half the mall, her ex-boyfriend is probably getting banned from the property, and by tonight everyone in your social circle will know exactly what happened. I thought about that as we reached our cars. The rain had stopped, and late afternoon sunlight was breaking through Portland's perpetual cloud cover, casting everything in golden light. You know what the funny thing is? I said. I feel terrible about all of this, but I also feel more alive than I have in months. Kalia smiled and kissed my cheek, a friendly gesture that I knew would be all over social media within the hour. Sometimes you have to tear down a broken system before you can build something better. As I drove home, I thought about that phrase. In IT, we call it creative destruction, eliminating obsolete processes to make room for innovation. Maybe that's all this was. Maybe I wasn't destroying my marriage so much as finally acknowledging it had already crashed. My phone buzzed with notifications, but I ignored them. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to going home. Not because Vanna would be there, she probably wouldn't, but because I was finally done pretending everything was fine. If shame was a currency, Vanna had just bought the whole mall. But somehow, I was the one who felt rich. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Vanna hadn't come home, which answered one question while raising several others. I made coffee and scrolled through the digital fallout from yesterday's mall incident. Rena's video had gone viral within our social circle. The footage was shaky but clear enough to show Ethan knocking over the perfume display and getting escorted out by security. Someone had even added a soundtrack. Bad Boys by Inner Circle. The comments section was brutal. Gabe called while I was eating breakfast. Dude, you're famous. That video has been shared like 50 times. Famous isn't the word I'd use, I said, though I was scrolling through the comments with guilty fascination. Are you okay? Like really okay? Because this is some next-level drama, even for Portland. I considered the question while watching rain streak down my kitchen window. I think I'm better than okay. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm actually doing something instead of just letting things happen to me. Just be careful, man. Cornered animals and all that. He was right to worry. By noon, the situation had escalated beyond social media gossip. Vanna's boss, Ms. Eldridge, called my office line, a number she shouldn't have had unless someone gave it to her. Mr. Trasker, this is Janet Eldridge from Pinnacle Marketing. I need to discuss some concerns about your wife's recent behavior. What kind of concerns? I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. There have been questions about her expense reports, specifically some personal purchases that were submitted for client reimbursement. I sat back in my chair, impressed despite myself. Someone had done their homework. I'm not sure how I can help with that. Well, there's also the matter of her relationship with a client, Ethan Rowe from Cascade Realty. Their account has become complicated. After Ms. Eldridge hung up, I sat in my office thinking about cause and effect. In network security, we call it the cascade failure. One small breach leads to another, then another, until the entire system collapses. Vanna's carefully constructed professional life was experiencing its own cascade failure. My phone buzzed with a text from Kalia. Coffee? I have updates. We met at a cafe in the Pearl District, one of those Portland places with exposed brick and baristas who take their coffee more seriously than most people take their marriages. Kalia looked tired but satisfied, like someone who'd been working all night on an important project. Ethan's business partner found out about yesterday, she said without preamble. Paul Morrison. Apparently he's not happy about his company being associated with mall security incidents. How do you know all this? Tessa works in their building. She heard Paul on the phone this morning, asking Ethan to take some time off until things cool down. I stirred my coffee and tried to process the information. So, Ethan's suspended? Better, he's radioactive. No one in real estate wants to be associated with the guy who got kicked out of the mall for fighting over lingerie. I feel like I should feel worse about this, I said. Do you? Not really. Kalia smiled. Good, because we're not done yet. That afternoon, I discovered just how not done we were. Driving past Ethan's house, purely by coincidence, I told myself, I noticed his pride and joy parked in the driveway. A restored 1987 BMW, midnight blue, the kind of car that costs more to maintain than most people's rent. I didn't plan what happened next. Sometimes the best ideas come from pure inspiration. I drove to a discount store and bought 12 packages of the cheapest lingerie I could find, the kind of synthetic stuff that comes in plastic bags and probably violates several international trade agreements. Then I drove back to Ethan's neighborhood and waited. At 11 p.m., when the street was empty and most windows were dark, I got to work. I draped every piece of bargain basement lingerie over Ethan's BMW, the hood, the mirrors, the antenna, even tucked some under the windshield wipers. I left all the tags attached and took photos from every angle. The pièce de résistance was posting the photos to Ethan's business social media accounts. I'd done some research and discovered that, like many small business owners, Ethan used the same password for everything. His Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn all got the same image. His beloved BMW decorated like a discount lingerie store explosion with the caption, New Marketing Strategy, Cascade Realty, will dress up your deals. I was home by midnight, feeling like a teenager who'd just pulled off the perfect prank. My phone was buzzing with notifications, but I ignored them and went to bed. At 3 a.m., every car alarm on Ethan's block started going off simultaneously. I'd used a simple frequency generator app, the kind of thing any IT person knows about, broadcast through a Bluetooth speaker I'd hidden in the bushes near his house. The beauty of it was the randomness. Alarms would stop and start again just as people were falling back asleep. By morning, Ethan's neighbors were furious. His car was still decorated with clearance rack lingerie, and his social media accounts had been suspended for inappropriate content. Gabe called around 9 a.m., laughing so hard he could barely speak. Please tell me you saw Ethan's LinkedIn post. Please tell me you saw it before they took it down. I might have seen it, I said, making more coffee and feeling surprisingly well rested for someone who'd been up until 3 a.m. committing acts of creative revenge. Marlow, I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. This is some next-level stuff. It's just problem solving, I said. Ethan was a problem. Now he's a different kind of problem, specifically everyone else's problem. That afternoon, Vanna finally came home. I was in my office, actually working for once, when I heard her key in the lock. She appeared in my doorway looking like she hadn't slept, her usually perfect hair showing signs of stress and her makeup slightly smudged. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" I didn't look up from my computer screen. "Because yesterday you seemed pretty clear about your priorities." "This has gone too far, Marlow. What you did to Ethan..." "What I did to Ethan?" I finally looked at her, and for a moment I saw the woman I'd married 12 years ago. Tired, vulnerable, maybe even a little scared. "Vanna, what I did was exactly what you'd been doing to me for months. I just did it faster and with better documentation." "That's different." "Is it? You lied about where you were going. You spent our money on things I never saw. You brought another man into our marriage and thought I wouldn't notice." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where she used to sit when we'd plan vacations or talk about buying the house. "I never meant for it to go this far." "Which part? The lying or the getting caught?" Before she could answer, the doorbell rang. We looked at each other, both probably thinking the same thing, that Ethan had finally worked up the courage to confront me directly. But when I opened the door, it was Kalia, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression that suggested she had news. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, though she didn't look sorry at all. "But I thought you should know. Vanna's been calling everyone we know, trying to get them to choose sides." Vanna appeared behind me. "Kalia, please. She's been telling people that you're having a breakdown, that you're dangerous and unpredictable." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Is that what you think, Vanna? That I'm dangerous?" "I think you're not yourself," Vanna said quietly. "The man I married wouldn't do these things." "You're right," I said. "The man you married was a pushover who let you walk all over him. But that man was also smart enough to eventually figure out when he was being played." Kalia stepped inside and closed the door behind her. "There's something else. Ethan's been calling around too, asking people about you, your work, your habits, your schedule." "What kind of questions?" I asked. "The kind that suggest he's planning something," Kalia said. "And Vanna, honey, if you think you can control what happens next, you're wrong." Vanna looked between us, and I saw something shift in her expression. Maybe she was finally realizing that her carefully managed situation had spun completely out of her control. "I want you both to leave," she said finally. "This is my house too, and I want you to leave." "Actually," I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared that morning, "this is our house, and according to these papers, filed this morning with our attorney, it's going to stay that way until we sort out who owns what." Vanna stared at the legal documents like they were written in a foreign language. "You filed for separation?" "I filed to protect our assets," I corrected. "There's a difference, but if you want to make this about divorce, we can do that too." The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Outside, Portland's eternal rain had started again, drumming against the windows with the rhythm of a countdown. Finally, Vanna picked up her purse and headed for the door. "This isn't over, Marlow." "No," I agreed, "but it's about to be." After she left, Kalia and I sat in my living room, sharing the wine she'd brought and listening to the rain. "You know she's going to try something," Kalia said. "Her and Ethan both." "Let them try," I said. "I've been playing defense for months. I think it's time to see what happens when I go on offense." Kalia smiled and raised her glass. "To offensive strategies." "To offensive strategies," I agreed, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The charity gala at Rainier Galleria was Vanna's idea, back when we were still pretending our marriage was salvageable. "Pinnacle Marketing is sponsoring the Children's Hospital fundraiser," she'd announced 3 weeks ago. "It'll be good for both our careers." Now, standing in the mall's main atrium, watching Portland's social elite mingle under twinkling lights, I realized it would indeed be good for my career, just not in the way she'd imagined. The event was perfect for what I had planned. Everyone who mattered in our social circle was here, dressed in their charity gala finest, phones out, social media buzzing. The mall had been transformed with elegant lighting and cocktail stations, but the bones of the place remained the same, including the digital billboards I'd spent the week learning to access. Kalia found me by the champagne table, wearing a black dress that turned heads and an expression of barely contained excitement. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "I'm sure about ending it," I said, watching Vanna across the room. She was holding court near the silent auction, laughing with her squad, and pretending yesterday's confrontation never happened. I'm tired of playing defense. And Ethan? I nodded toward the jewelry store entrance, where Ethan had just appeared with a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger, prettier, and clearly expensive, the kind of arm candy that men like Ethan collected to prove their worth. That's interesting, Kalia murmured. Think Vanna knows about her? About to find out. At exactly 8 p.m., as the gala reached its peak social media moment, I activated the program I'd spent 3 days writing. Every digital billboard in Rainier Galleria, the ones advertising sales, upcoming events, and store promotions, simultaneously displayed the same image. It was the photo from Silk and Satin, Vanna and Ethan leaving the boutique, him carrying shopping bags, her touching his arm, both of them laughing. But I'd enhanced it, sharpened the details, added a timestamp and location data. Below the image, text scrolled like a news ticker. Joint account purchases, $247.83. Transparency in marriage, priceless. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phones came out like weapons. The charity auction halted as the auctioneer stared up at the screens in confusion. Vanna went pale, then red, then pale again. Ethan looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His date, whoever she was, pulled out her phone and started recording everything. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, stepping onto the small stage where the auction was being held. The microphone was still live, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent atrium. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Sometimes the truth has a way of forcing itself into the open. Ms. Eldridge, Vanna's boss, was staring at the screens with the expression of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. Paul Morrison, Ethan's business partner, looked like he was calculating the cost of this latest public relations disaster. Marlow, stop this, Vanna called out, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. Stop what? I asked innocently. I'm just sharing some family photos. Isn't that what social media is for? That's when Kalia played her part perfectly. She stepped forward with a folder of papers, the chat logs, the bank statements, the timeline of lies I'd spent days documenting. Since we're being transparent, Kalia announced, her voice carrying across the atrium, maybe everyone should know that this has been going on for months. The secret meetings, the joint account purchases, the elaborate cover stories about working late. Rena and Tessa, Vanna's loyal squad, were frantically trying to spin the situation on their phones. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too public, too documented. Ethan made his fatal mistake then. Instead of leaving quietly or trying to defuse the situation, he charged toward the stage like some kind of discount action hero. You think you're so smart, he shouted, pointing at me. Hiding behind your computers and your bank records. You want to do this in public? Let's do this in public. He never made it to the stage. Security was already moving. Tommy and 2 other guards I didn't recognize, all of them looking like they'd been expecting trouble. But before they could intervene, Ethan's date stepped directly into his path. Ethan Rowe, she said in a voice that carried across the suddenly silent atrium. You lying, cheating piece of garbage. The entire gala froze. This wasn't in my script. Cleo? Ethan stopped short, confusion replacing anger on his face. Surprised to see me? Cleo smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. You should be. I've been planning this for months. She turned to address the crowd, phone cameras tracking her every movement. Everyone here should know that Ethan Rowe has been running this same con for years. Married women, joint accounts, expensive gifts charged to their husbands' credit cards. I should know. He did it to me 3 years ago. The silence was absolute. Even the mall's background music seemed to have stopped. Vanna, Cleo continued, focusing on my wife. You're not special. You're just the latest mark in a very old game. Vanna looked like she'd been slapped. That's not... Ethan told me. That you were different? That his feelings for you were real? Cleo laughed. Honey, he's got the same speech memorized. I bet he even used the same jewelry store. The digital billboards flickered and changed, now displaying a new image. Ethan with different women at different times, all of them in the same jewelry store, all of them laughing at the same jokes, all of them carrying shopping bags from the same boutiques. I stared at the screens, then at Cleo. How did you... change the displays? Cleo smiled. I work in digital marketing, and I've been tracking this man for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to destroy him. The pieces clicked into place. You're not his date. You're his reckoning. Exactly. Ethan was backing toward the exit, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and dawning terror. This is insane. You're all insane. What's insane, I said, stepping down from the stage, is thinking you could run the same con in the same city and never get caught. What's insane, Cleo added, is not realizing that some of your victims might compare notes. What's insane, Kalia finished, is messing with people who are smarter than you are. Security moved in then, not to break up a fight, but to escort Ethan out of the mall. He went quietly, probably realizing that any further scene would only make things worse for him. The crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed, excited tones. Phones were still recording, social media was still buzzing, but the main event was over. Vanna stood alone near the silent auction table, abandoned by her squad, ignored by her boss, looking smaller and more lost than I'd ever seen her. I walked over to her, Kalia and Cleo flanking me like some kind of revenge squad. 12 years, I said quietly, so only she could hear. 12 years I trusted you. 12 years I believed in us. Marlow, You what? You're sorry? You made a mistake? You got caught up in something bigger than you expected? She nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. The thing is, I continued, I might have forgiven the affair. I might have forgiven the lying. But you tried to make me think I was crazy. You tried to gaslight me into believing my own eyes were lying. I never meant... You meant every bit of it. You and Ethan had this whole thing planned out. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught by someone who actually pays attention to details. I turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and Vanna, the joint accounts are permanently frozen. The house is in my name only. I checked the deed this morning, and your boss already knows about the expense report fraud. What am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Figure it out, I said. You're a smart woman. You'll think of something. As we walked toward the parking garage, Cleo fell into step beside us. That was beautifully executed, she said. Both of you. Thank you for the assist, I replied. Though I have to ask, how long have you been planning this? 3 years, ever since Ethan destroyed my marriage and disappeared with $15,000 of my money. She smiled. I've been tracking his patterns, documenting his methods, waiting for him to target someone with the resources to help me take him down. And you found me? I found both of you. Kalia's been feeding me information for weeks. I looked at Kalia, who shrugged. She reached out after the mall incident. Turns out Ethan has quite a reputation among divorced women in Portland. We reached the parking garage, rain echoing off concrete walls like applause. In the distance, I could hear sirens. Probably nothing to do with us, but it seemed appropriate anyway. So what happens now? I asked. Now, Cleo said, Ethan Rowe becomes unemployable in this city. His reputation is ruined, his business relationships are destroyed, and several of his former victims are filing fraud charges. And Vanna. Vanna gets to live with the consequences of her choices, Kalia said, just like the rest of us. I stood there in the parking garage, listening to the rain and thinking about endings. Not the kind of endings you see in movies, with reconciliation and forgiveness and everyone learning valuable lessons. Real endings, where actions have consequences and some things can't be fixed. You know what the funny thing is? I said finally. I feel sorry for her. Why? Kalia asked. Because she threw away something real for something fake, and now she has neither. We parted ways in the garage, Cleo disappearing into the Portland night like some kind of avenging angel, Kalia heading home to what I suspected would be a very active social media evening. I drove through the empty streets, windshield wipers fighting the persistent rain, and thought about new beginnings. Not the kind forced by circumstance, but the kind you choose for yourself. Tomorrow I would start over. New apartment, new routines, new possibilities. Tonight, I was just a man driving through Portland in the rain, finally free of other people's lies. The rain kept falling, washing the city clean, and for the first time in months, I was looking forward to seeing what tomorrow would bring.